So my very first question is, what are dry and wet decontamination, and what is FAST-ACT?
Sure. So when you think about wet and dry decontamination solutions, it's the approach or the tools that medical professionals or hazmat professionals will use to kind of clean or treat a scene or person. So wet decon primarily will be used for biological removal, where dry decon really excels for kind of the rapid decontamination of chemical biological agents. Where FAST-ACT comes into play, we always pride ourselves as we were the kids speaking about dry decon before it was really cool, right? So we were preaching the utility of it, especially when you think about cold weather and trying to use a liquid on a person. So FAST-ACT stands for First Applied Sorbent Treatment Against Chemical Threats, and it's designed, a metal oxide designed to come into contact with the offending agent, break it down without creating any harmful byproducts. What that means for the person trying to use it is quicker, faster, most effective, doesn't require any mixing or any water source, so saves time to prepare. It makes it more effective and broader in its use, and it reduces the amount of risk in doing something wrong.
So where did this come from?
Actually, we created it originally, and it's still used for the Department of Defense. They wanted a way to destroy chemical warfare agents and these chemical warfare agent stockpiles. They were sending soldiers downhill in these kind of remote areas, finding these munitions, and said, hey, we want to be able to quickly deactivate them, make them inert, without using traditional methods, which at the time was blowing them up. So you can imagine blowing up a chemical warfare agent. It goes downstream, there was some environmental risk and also risk to the operator. So when FAST-ACT was introduced, it was a quick and effective way to neutralize that chemical warfare agent while leaving it on the scene without the environmental risk. So 20 years ago, that was super kind of cutting edge. And even today, there's not many technologies out there that can do and fit that task.
So is this used, so it's in regular warfare. I mean, you have it out there on the field and as well as anywhere else, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's used in a ton of environments. I've kind of be happy to name a few battlefields, and actually in real world scenarios. A lot of solutions never make it to the warfighter because they're designed for training and exercise tests in a laboratory. FAST-ACT operates in 37 plus countries, and on the war side, it's exclusively used in the Ukraine. So kind of counteract with both U.S. Department of Defense and some of the Ukrainian forces and European forces that it's used there. And we've gotten feedback of, hey, this really helped us. It saved lives, it saved time. It really helped us in a real war zone. When you think about it, that's tremendous to think about your tool being applied for that and in that kind of scenario. But it's also used in industrial environments for EV fires, battery spills, environmental health and safety. We use it for air quality. It's in 13,000 schools, 6,000 municipalities. So I always joke around that every single day I'm on a different call or different kind of conversation. And it just speaks to the utility of what we've come up with for something to be so high performing and safe and be used against a broad array of verticals.
It's incredible. So is it something that you would use, that you would have like alongside like an eye splash sink or something like that? I'm like kind of like, that's what I'm envisioning.
Absolutely, that's a good analogy there. So when you think about it, normally it would be placed around the chemicals or in the laboratory or chemical storage. And if chemical spilled over or there was a vapor release, depending on the incident is the FAST-ACT tool that you would use. So if a college student was not so careful, left the cap open, spilled some nitric acid on the floor, you would go grab a shaker bottle and apply it and easily clean it up. There was vapor fumes from an EV fire or EV battery extinguisher where you would be able to spray the FAST-ACT cylinder into the air. If it got onto your contents or your personal belongings or your skin, we have mitts and wipes that can be used. So we've come up with different applications, but it's the same metal oxide technology used. It's just how it needs to be applied and what equipment it needs to be kind of dispersed through.
Wow. Is it expensive?
Well, when you think about the word expensive, when you think about the human life and the human safety and the amount of time that it's going to save, I think it's actually very cost effective because we speak to hazmat professionals and sometimes they're on the scene and they use their most abundant tool available to them, which is water, right? They have water, they kind of hydrolyze it and they dilute it. But when we say, hey, if you use FAST-ACT, that would have taken you 10, 15 minutes versus a couple of hours on the scene, you wouldn't have to worry about the environmental cleanup and you wouldn't have to worry about some of these residual effects. I see that as an ROI and saving money versus, the expenditure on the FAST-ACT.
So what about like regular fires? I'm thinking of Like if a house fire, could you use it on that?
So it's not designed to suppress the fire itself, but the chemicals after the fact. So normally, and this is a good story, fire chiefs or fire inspectors, they go back into the home to determine the cause of the fire, maybe a couple of days after, but there's still things off gassing. We protect them where they can actually spray the cylinder if they needed to. They can wipe their clothes down. They could wipe their personal belongings after visiting that scene, because things are still off gassing. Things are still kind of cooling off and releasing into the environment. And that's one of the leading causes of cancer within the fire departments and the fire industry is amongst the chiefs. And a lot of that's attributed to they're going back to the scene and they're not wearing the PPE, right? It's not a fire, so they're kind of there with their polos on and doing that. So it could be used in that case. And for a EV fire and EV battery for a homeowner, we're actually in the process of designing new products, which I don't want to give away the secrets, that could be deployed by regular folks to help in incidents like that. So because FAST-ACT is so easy to use, it doesn't require the technical training that other products do. So we're hoping to not only equip law enforcement and medical professionals, we're also hoping to bring it into the consumer world as well.
Where is it made?
Right here in Kansas State. So it's just Kansas State technology. It's proudly produced in Topeka, Kansas. It's been there for about 2 decades and produced. And that's where our R&D and our technical and manufacturing is produced and made.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is. It's really exciting to say that.
Absolutely. So what makes dry contamination with FAST-ACT a game changer for hospitals compared to traditional wet decontamination methods?
That's a long answer, but I'm going to try to be short and concise with you. So
Okay.
hospitals traditionally, their tools that they're using is soap and water. So when you think about the soap and water, what it requires is, one, the introduction of the water source and soap to the patient. That takes anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes. There's a lot of risk to that when you're applying or dousing someone with water. If I had a body full of chemicals and that water rinsed off and landed on the ground, or it went down into the sewer, or there's the drain system, you also have to be aware of that. It also leaves room for cross-contamination if I don't clean that patient totally and I come into contact with other personnel within the hospital. So water itself, and then lastly, one very important top point is in cold weather, they're treating these patients outside, right outside of the hospital. So would you like to be doused in cold water and soap to be cleaned? And there was a lot of cases of hypothermia where, sub-freezing temperatures, and they had to do that, declothe you, wet you, kind of reintroduce that. So now that you understand the current situation, when you can just go in and spray someone with a powder right outside the hospital, get them into that room within 2 to 3 minutes, have them rinse off, and now get them into treatment. You've saved anywhere from 7 to 12 minutes. You use less resources of setting up a tent, setting up the water supply, and then you also reduce the risk of environmental runoff and the risk of exposure. There were some really good studies done in a laboratory in Singapore, which actually showed FAST-ACT versus the traditional soap and water, and they found it was better performing. They found it reduced the risk of contamination. You got it into the hair and some of the hard to reach areas. And the patients that were off-gassing, because we take for granted that chemicals sit in the skin and off-gas later, actually reduced that. So save time, save resources, better performing, safer for the environment and the hospital, and reduce the risk of contamination. So to me, those are all game-changing items that help the hospital save time, money, and hopefully, improve patient treatment.
So could you walk us through how FAST-ACT works during like a real world decontamination scenario? Say a chemical spill or a CBRN incident in a trauma bay.
Absolutely. So let's say you're bringing in a patient first. Let's say they get introduced outside, brought into the hospital from the ambulance. Get brought in, patient's able to stand, walk in. Before they enter that hospital, we have a FAST-ACT 400-gram cylinder that they're sprayed in. So they're put in a tent, obviously, and they're sprayed from head to toe. They're put on with an N95 mask and a face shield. That's just preventing any sort of nuisance dust from getting into it, even though it's safe for ocular, skin, and oral. Once that patient is now sprayed, great, you're seeing the coverage. FAST-ACT begins to work. It's making contact with the chemical agents on their skin. It's neutralizing it without the exothermic reaction. That hospital staff member now has the patient kind of just do a couple turns, make sure they're fully covered, brings them inside, starts the rinsing off, their decon showers in place. That water that's going down into the storage is inert, so it's safe because you've already taken care of the chemicals. Any of their belongings, whether it's their cell phone or the instruments that's used on that patient, also be applied with FAST-ACT. We all know how our personal belongings and how tied we are to it. If I was in an incident in the hospital, I would not want to give up my cell phone. I want to have my cell phone near me. I would want to be communicating with family members and folks from the outside. Often they would have to take that, sequester it off, kind of say, hey, you might or might not get this back. But they can also use that FAST-ACT Rapid Decon kit, take care of the patient, take care of their belongings, take care of the tools they used, and now put this patient into treatment, whether it's for burns, whether it's just for routine treatment. All that information is all that property now is being deconned. So in that incident, FAST-ACT's being applied into several methods. You got the full powder on the body, you got the mitts and the wipes for face and belongings, and then the taking care of the equipment and the surfaces. In a hazmat scene, let's say there was a spill in the chemo lab in the hospital. Many different products you can use. You can use our shaker bottle to turn that liquid spill to a hard spill. You can take care of the vapors, which no other product on the market does. It's a fire extinguisher for chemical vapors and releases. So it really knocks them down. And then you can take care of the surfaces and the equipment within your hospital. So like I said, you asked me, is it expensive? Well, when I could use this one product for multiple applications, I reduce redundant training and I save time and money. So hopefully that gave you a good understanding of, what the tools and what the capabilities of FAST-ACT can do in a trauma scene and CBR incident. A survey done in that study in Singapore, folks actually felt by applying something above and beyond the powder and them seeing it introduced and then them feeling that water source, they actually felt that there was more going on. It eased their mind, eased their kind of anxiety. So that psychological first aid is real.
So many hospitals worry about equipment corrosion and operational downtime after decontamination. That is a justifiable worry. So how does FAST-ACT address these challenges while maintaining patient and staff safety?
I think one of the unique attributes of FAST-ACT is its ability to break down some of the world's most harmful chemicals while being safe to apply on sensitive equipment. We've done countless third-party testing, and also the U.S. Department of Defense tested sensitive equipment, and FAST-ACT doesn't oxidize, it doesn't corrode, or it doesn't degrade any of the hardware or equipment. So for hospitals and even for hazmat professionals, I have a $100,000 meter. I don't want that meter gone because the chances of me getting a replacement is next to none. And also when you put something out of service, that means there's not another one on standby to use. So the ability to use FAST-ACT, keep equipment in service, and also the longevity of your equipment, because sometimes the decontamination solutions used are more corrosive than the agent they're trying to decontaminate. So they're very, peracetic acid, they're very acidic in nature and they corrode or oxidize components, where FAST-ACT would never do that.
That's so interesting. So FAST-ACT has been adopted in facilities like Woodstock Hospital and Singapore General Hospital. You mentioned Singapore. What lessons have these institutions learned from implementation, and how could others replicate their success?
I think one of the lessons that I hear a lot is by taking the leap and modernizing, they filled voids that they didn't know existed. And a lot of the times that's mutual aid. When you get a cold orange or CBRN incident comes in, everyone is all hands on deck. Mm-hmm. If there's not that staff available, well, guess what? You're having to set up that tent. You're having to get those water hoses out. You're having to set all those things up. You take for granted that when you plan and you train for these incidents, everything's perfect. I have 6 people with me. It takes 6 people to set up this tent. It takes, but in the real world, 2 people might be out of commission. They might be doing something else. Now you have 3. It might become operationally unfeasible now. Now with FAST-ACT, because it requires little resources, in the event that you didn't have the entire mutual aid or the entire team to do it, still apply it. So it doesn't require that intensive resource. It's easy and simple to use, and you don't need to know the chemical. A lot of the things that folks tell us is, patient comes in screaming, hey, what happened? You try to get the information for them. We don't know. We found them unresponsive in the garage, bunch of liquid stuff around them. That's scary, because if you apply water to some of those chemicals, it can actually be worse off than the chemical itself. So for the medical professional, you're playing a game of chance there of trying to figure out what to do. With FAST-ACT, it will never have an adverse effect. So if you didn't know what it was, at the very least, it's going to adsorb and break down what's on that patient. So what they're learning and what they're seeing is, wow, it's filling a void. it's saving us time and resources. It's making us more effective. And, when the event comes and we don't know, we feel a level of confidence in using FAST-ACT. We know that we're not going to hurt this patient. And we know at the very least, we're going to remove that toxin and chemical agent from them.
Wow, that is so cool. So from an infection prevention standpoint, which of course is always my thoughts, an emergency management standpoint, how does incorporating a dry decontamination SOP strengthen hospital preparedness and response time?
When you look at it from a preparedness standpoint, is the amount of time it takes to get some of these liquid decons and some of these water sources up and running. So when you're looking at response time, I have to get the water source out, I have to get the sponge, I have to clean up, I have to douse the patient, I have to do this. And right now, hospitals and medical scenes are trying to be more mindful of temperature. I visited a hospital a couple months ago where they said, yeah, we heat the water up and it takes about 7 minutes. And I thought, well, that's great for the patient, but the 7 minutes is a lot of time in between to do so. So at one point, you're thinking about patient comfort, which is amazing. And then the next thing is like, that's 7 minutes that you're kind of losing in that treatment time. From an infectious control standpoint with FAST-ACT and the testing and laboratory testing we've done, is being able to do so, it got the patient clean to NATO standards. So if you're familiar with military standards, NATO standards is probably one of the more stringent standards from clean aspect. When you correlate that to infectious control in hospital, you're now the gold standard. You're above and beyond what you would normally be able to get from an efficiency or clean level of soap and water. So I think we're setting a new standard for speed, efficiency, patient treatment, and also the resources that are just not available to the medical world today.
Does it work on blood and urine and stuff like that? Or just
not
chemicals?
Not in the sense of biological, so for the chemical threats itself, that's what it's designed. So when we think about it and the word FAST-ACT, right? And you think, well, fast, first thing is it is fast. It's ready to use in fast, but it's against the chemical threats. So that's what it's going to do. So we have some biological and pathogen removal when it comes to air quality, but not in the sense of kind of, the biological cleanup.
Okay, got it. All right. So looking ahead, how do you see dry decontamination technologies like FAST-ACT evolving, and what role would they play in national or global hospital preparedness strategies?
So one thing I figured, the Navy SEALs had it figured out. 20 years ago, they said dry decon is the way to go for chemicals, right? They said it's quicker, faster. And if you think about the Navy SEALs, they're always on the move, they're mobile, lightweight. I think when we think about our medical professionals, we have to think about them like the Navy SEALs, right? They're on the run. They don't have all the tools that they normally would want to have on them, but they still have a job to do. So I see the modernization of equipping our medical personnel with a single-use tool with a dry decontamination that allows them to still do the job at a high level without all the unnecessary equipment. So making them faster, more lightweight, more secure, and higher performing. So I know it's a tough analogy. I know the SEAL team and the SEAL community will probably get mad at me, but that's what I would like to see done in the medical world. Is I see the nurses, the doctors, the hospital emergency room teams scrambling around, grabbing things. I saw, and I was very impressed, a nurse grabbing maybe a 30-pound tent over her shoulder running down. And I said, well, that's all admirable, but what if we reduced all of that? What if we need half those equipment? What does that mean for not only budget, for time, setup, and cleanup? And that's what I'm hoping to see. I'm hoping that the awareness continues to grow. And I'm not saying ditch water and all, because I think there's a hybrid approach to it. I think the water and the rinse off works well. But I think in the world where everything's rapidly moving, everything's being automated, dry decon really fills that void for the medical world.
That's awesome. Do you have anything else you would like to add?
I think your questions were great. I mean, we're excited. You touch one person at a time, right? When you're a small company and you try to go out and you visit this, so that's why folks like yourself are really game changers, just getting the word out, spreading it. We are evangelists first, right? We go out, we train. Hey, if it makes sense to buy the product, go ahead. And I think that's what our mission is the next couple of years, to just really get it into the hands of people and train them on it and see that modernization. And hopefully it has a good, long-lasting benchmark of what that meant for the patient treatment side of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thank you. I really appreciate it. You have a great day. Thank you for the opportunity.